Thank you all for coming. I don't think I've ever been put in the big room before, so thank you, Kevin. So yes, while we're waiting for that to get set up, I'll just very quickly mention the two books. So I wrote this one back in 2009, and basically the whole premise of it is that you look up a disorder A to Z, and it's got a list of points. Doesn't explain why, but it is referenced. So it's easy in a clinic situation to just find the condition in here and choose a few points. If you may be stuck, or you've got a patient that you've not treated that condition before. So it's a nice, straight, easy one, because I found with books often there are disorders and treatments all through books, but it's finding it quickly when your patient's on the table. So that's that one, and you're welcome to have a look at it. And this one is the one that's just been released by Singing Dragon. And this one is designed to get you to look at how you combine your points when you treat your patients, and maybe look more at a better understanding of why you've chosen the ones you've chosen. And I think a lot of the time what happens is, certainly with in Australia, we tell you what points to do, and then you get into student clinic and then you rehash what we told you. And then you don't necessarily know how every single point in the combination works. And so this is designed to sort of take you through your processes and make you think a little bit more about why you choose the points you do. And so at the end of it, the idea is that you are able to construct all your own treatments, hopefully better than what you already do, so that you wouldn't actually need the book anymore after you've read it, in a sense. So that's those two done. The shameless promotion over. Oh, this is looking promising. So thank you for coming today. The 8 Extraordinary Vessels is certainly something that I'm really passionate about. And it came about because when I was studying, we got 6 hours in 4 years on 8 Extraordinary Vessels. And we had a lecturer who said, okay, I've got to teach you the 8 extras, but they're shit and they don't work. And, but, I'm forced to do it because, and he swore and he carried on. And then we had an assessment. We actually had an assignment on the 8 Extraordinary Vessels. Thank you, team, so much. And we basically were like, oh, okay, they're terrible. Right, no worries, they're terrible, but we've still got to do an assessment on it. And then he marked us really poorly, and I think it was the only subject where I didn't even pass the assignment portion of it. And so I just went, okay, 8 extras don't work, they're terrible. And I actually continued that sort of idea really for about 5 or 6 years. And it wasn't until I started lecturing myself and I got given a subject that had the 8 extras in it, and I was like, oh no, they're terrible, they don't work. Maybe I can just take it out and the students won't know any different. And I went, oh, it's just not going to work for me. I've got to do it. So I went, right, you know what, I've got to find out more about it. So I hit every book I could find, which back in 2000 weren't many 8 extras books available really. Chip Chase hadn't translated Li Shi Zhen's book. So really, I don't think Giovanni had even done his 8 extra channels book. So we had one book really, was that green book from Matsumoto and Birch that I used religiously, and started to look at it and went, oh, you know what, actually, this looks like it really can work. And I'll give you a clinical example a little later on me, because I thought, well, if I'm going to do the 8 extras and I don't really know if it works, probably the best person to do it on is to do it on myself first. And then I got friends and family say, hey, can I do this on you? And then once I felt like I was comfortable and it showed that it worked, that I started to do it on my patients. And have some good clinical examples throughout the talk today. So we have the first bit now through to lunch, so that's part 1, and we do a basic review, really quick, and then we do the Ren, the Do, and the Chong, and then we have our lunch, and if you're still here, in the afternoon we finish off with the rest of the 8 extras. Now they don't just do emotions, but emotions is something that is kind of I can't say it's a specialty, because you can't say that in Australia, but it's a special interest of mine is treating emotion-based clients. So I thought this is a perfect opportunity, great theme for me, this whole conference, and then to tie in the emotions I thought was going to be, for me, really exciting to do. Now, how do I get it to go down? Did I break it again?
Did you break it?
I just need to change the slide.
You did break it again. Can you talk about your new book?
Can I talk about it? Okay, so who does 8 extras here in your clinics? Okay. See, in Australia, if I asked that question, it would be hardly any hands that would go up. And I've taught the 8 extras also in Rothenburg, in Germany, also in 2 cities in America, at 2 conferences in America. How are we going? We've got a screen, but the front slide. So
Hold them up for you.
you can hold them up for me. We need Kevin again.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So anyway, the main thing what we're doing today obviously is to work our way through each one. If you were with Hamid yesterday, you will get a tiny little bit of that today, but what was good is when I was in his talk, I definitely saw that we were quite different in our approach. And what I'm also going to do is put up some treatments as well for you. Do we need Kevin again?
And will you be giving your slides to Kevin so we can give them to us?
Yes, I can do that. So do you want to write down my email address while we're waiting? So it is on the slides, but it is DAHARTMANN, so DA Hartmann, number 8, at gmail.com. Yeah, just the number 8, at gmail.com. Yep. So if you email me, I can send you all the slides. So, I guess what... Now, what did you push? How do we go back? Okay.
You
Don't go back. Now, yesterday, or was it Friday actually, there was a little slide that Kevin had put up about how you do PowerPoint presentations. So this is a little wordy for probably what Kevin likes. But what I really love about this quote is it really ties in well with what we're going to do today. And so this was a philosopher, Seneca, who was around when Jesus was alive. And he was a senator in the Roman Senate. And he was also a philosopher. And he had this friend here that said, "When I looked into myself, Seneca, some of my vices appeared clearly on the surface so that I could lay my hand on them. Some were more hidden away in the depths. Some were not there all the time, but return at intervals. These last, I would say, are the most troublesome. They are like prowling enemies who pounce on you when occasion offers and allow you neither to be at the ready as in war, nor at ease as in peace. However, the state I find myself in, most find myself in, for why should I not admit the truth to you as to a doctor, is that I am not really free of the vices which I feared and hated, though not, on the other hand, subject to them. This puts me in a condition that is not the worst, but an extremely peevish and quarrelsome one. I am neither ill nor well." And I think that ties in really well. And what I like about it is that, I guess from your studies in Chinese medicine, we don't want the emotions to not be there. You know, if you stub your toe and you yell, well, that's an appropriate emotion. If you stub your toe and you go, "Oh, darn, that's unfortunate," and you hobble away, I don't think that's an appropriate response. And if someone that is close to you that dies and you don't grieve, then I don't think that's appropriate either, or that we overgrieve. So emotions need to have their place so that sometimes we react to them and sometimes we move through them. And so that's very important with regards to what we're doing today as well, is relevant emotions for a situation apply, we move through it out the other side, thank the emotion in a sense, and continue forward. Okay, so the 8 extraordinary vessels, that's the pinyin term for it, and basically, as you can see, the Jing Ba Mai just means the 8 extraordinary vessels. And a mai is not just a channel in a sense, because it's a channel that fills and empties, but it's also a channel that can store energy. So again, you probably learnt this when you did your 8 extras. The 8 extras can stop letting energy out and only take energy in. And that's where you might be starting to get quite fatigued. One of the examples of where your 8 extras give out energy for a while, but because it's not getting it back, it says, I need to store this because it's core level energy to keep you alive. And so I'm not going to give out any more. And so what happens there is you get something like chronic fatigue syndrome. And what's happened is the 8 extraordinary vessels have said, no, you can't have any more because this is keeping you alive. But then if you nourish the body again and the 8 extras start to swell again, like a dam filling with water, it allows the energy out again. So historically, there's not a lot. And historically, when there is information on the 8 extras, it doesn't necessarily tell you how to do it, or what it treats, or anything like that. But we have a few of the classics that do mention them. So the Ling Shu, for example, Huang Fu Mi has a little bit in it. Probably the one that maybe you're most familiar with is the Li Shi Zhen one from 1578, because again, it has been translated into English. And then we have a few others as well. This is a really amazing set of volumes, but because I don't speak or read Chinese, I only have access to the translated versions of it. But that's another good one. Okay, so basically speaking, the 8 extraordinary vessels are a fascinating and important part of the channel system in Chinese medicine. No matter how much one researches them, there is always a new aspect emerging, a new understanding, a new angle. Now, I don't know whether you would agree, so I'm curious to see what you think, but a lot of the 8 extras books that are coming out are the author's clinical experience on 8 extras. It's not necessarily referenced a lot. Have you found that with the 8 extras books that you've looked at? So Yvonne Farrell, for example, is a good example. Great book, well written, excellent content, but it's not referenced. But she does much, but she does tell you that at the start. She says, well, you know, from my 40 years of clinical experience, this is what I've found with the 8 extras. And for me, I find that I don't mind that, but obviously some people that are really steered towards the classics and needing to prove every statement made, they don't sit so well with books that talk about clinical experience. Okay, so we have the Ren, the Du and the Chong. The first 3 channels made in the body, they start in the space between the kidneys in the dantian, and it's what makes them inherently linked to the kidneys. So I kind of have this image of it where deep inside myself, kind of a bit behind the belly button, maybe a bit below, right in the middle of me is sort of where my dantian is, and that's where those channels start. So at the point of your conception, and you become this little thing, basically from that point forward, that energy becomes your dantian as you grow, and that's where those channels start. And they come down, and they all come out at the surface at Ren 1. And then they all split into their own channels. Which poses the question, Ren 1's probably a pretty darn good point to use. It's just not in a very convenient location. And look, I have not done that on anyone. I have needled it on myself because I wanted to see what it felt like. But yeah, not done that on anyone. But the theory is that it would be an amazing point because it's treating your Ren, your Du and your Chong. Anyway, that's the way it goes, I guess. The 8 extraordinary vessels are at a deeper level in the energetic strata of the human body and can all treat the root, and they strengthen the association among the Jing law channels and collaterals. So they control, join, store and regulate the vital substances of each channel, and they help to balance the flow left, right, up, down, front, back, internal, external. And as I said before, if you've got any spare stuff left over, so you eat something and it makes good qi and you don't need it all, then it can get stored in the 8 extras for when you do need it. And I've got a clinical example of where I've tested that theory out, again on myself, but we'll talk about that as we get closer to the break. And they also connect the main channels and organs with the 6 extraordinary organs. And they have their special keys for unlocking the stores of energy and memory lodged in the heart, in the cells and in the muscles. And the keys are either called the confluent points or they're called the opening and coupled points. And typically what that means is, and again this is a bit debatable, is do you need both keys? So if I'm doing, say, the Renmai, do I have to do both keys, as in do I have to do lung 7 and kidney 6? And then if I do have to do both keys, am I doing them bilateral or am I doing them unilateral? If I'm doing them unilateral, am I doing them left or right? And then if you're male or female, does that change how I do the points? So it's still all a little bit sort of up in the air, and in the end I guess you probably do it a certain way, and if you feel like you're getting good results, then probably stick with it. That's certainly the way I do it. And they can treat inherited memory or memories one wishes to forget or have squashed them away deep inside. Hamid talked a bit about that yesterday if you were in his workshop. Now this is one of the debatable ones. I'm not saying that Unschuld is wrong. What it says though is the illnesses of these vessels cannot emerge from within the vessels themselves. They're always caused by an influx of surplus contents from the main channels. But then this poses this question here, what about genetic diseases? I mean, if you're conceived and you get your little bits and pieces from your ancestors, and some of that is a genetic disease potential, well, didn't that kind of start in the 8 extras because they were the first vessels made in you? So this is a kind of a bit of I'm not really sure. I believe that it does. So I guess I'm saying that I don't agree with Unschuld in this instance. So what else do? They do provide some support for the defensive chi. They're involved with the 7 and 8 year cycles, and they work on these 3 ancestries. So prenatal, early postnatal, the past, the present, the future selves, and the view of self. And each of them we'll talk about as well. So when do I use the 8 extras? Well, the top one is my big thing with the 8 extras, is using them for mental and emotional problems. I also consider them if the patient's quite complex and I can't nail down a really accurate diagnosis, so I consider using it then too. And I'm sorry that this might be in the way for the slides, or I'm in the way too. We might be able to find some of them that I can get a clicker off so I can move around a bit more. Complicated, chronic or confusing conditions, neurological conditions, or the last one, which is interesting, is elite athletic or sports performance. And this one is including musculoskeletal complaints, and I'll talk about that one shortly, a clinical example of that. So how to use. Again, no one can really, we're not getting a situation where enough people are thinking the same thought where we're going to do them the same way all the time. Okay? So that's kind of really what that's sort of saying. And again, the classics didn't necessarily sort of give you all the information that you needed. So for me, basically what I do is, and it has changed over the years, but this has been pretty much my standard for probably the last 10 years or so, and that is that I needle the opening point bilateral, and then I needle the coupled point bilateral, and then I needle at least one point on that vessel. And then I might use points on that aren't specific to that vessel. So with the Renmai as the example, I'd do my lung 7s bilateral and my kidney 6s bilateral, and then some Ren points. And then if I wanted to, say, do a heart 7 or something to calm the shen, then I could add that in later on. So that's pretty much what I do.
Are you leaving the needles in or taking them out straight away?
Leave them in. Yep, so, and I don't mind which side I start. So lung 7, kidney 6, a few Ren points, and then they chill for 20, 30 minutes. Yeah. And then usually what I do is take them out in reverse order. But I haven't always done that. And I have tried unilateral, And then some people say, oh, actually, I do a lung 7 on one side, then I put the kidney 6 in, then I come back up and do the other lung 7, and then do that kidney 6. And if that's the way that you do it and it works, that's great. I guess you're creating intent with the way you're doing the needling, aren't you? And if you don't even mind what order they go in and you still get good results, again, that's your intent and what you believe works, and that's fine. There has to be a warning label on the 8 extras, and that is that the more that you use of them, the more that you open. So if I did a lung 7 and kidney 6, then theoretically I've opened 2 of the 8 extraordinary vessels. So in that instance, as you can see, I've actually done the Ren Mai with the Yin Chow Mai. And then if I decided I want to do the Ren and the Do, then theoretically I've actually opened up 4 of them. I know Hamid yesterday was talking about he doesn't always do the coupled point. And so that would be one way of eliminating getting that second one treated. And so it is worth pointing that out. And that's why that shirt works, because I decided when I was doing the 8 extras that I should see what happens if I did them all in the same treatment at the same time. So I sat there and stuck 16 needles in myself, all of the opening and couple points, which is quite clever when you're thinking about where the needles are. And then I lay back and relaxed for half an hour. And I did it for a purpose, not least of which to see what would happen, but also because of what I'd been reading, which was if you open up a whole heap, you flush the system, you flood the system with energy. And so I thought, oh, does that mean I could get this huge energy release? And so what I did was I planned it all out, and for about, 10 weeks? Because I used to play a lot of sport, and before a national sports event, I started training 12 weeks out, and basically I did acupuncture to build my energy for 12 weeks. Tonify, tonify, tonify. And then the day before the tournament started, I stuck all those needles in. And then I played my sport event, which went over 5 days. And I'm not going to say I was like a chook with its head cut off, because I was actually really focused. It wasn't aimless running around. I had more energy. I didn't have to sub so much playing the sport. I recovered faster. I slept great. I didn't get any sort of lactic acid buildup, which was leading to any muscle fatigue. And I was so focused on the field. So I wasn't dropping the ball. I wasn't making mistakes because my brain was getting tired. It was most extraordinary 5 days of my sporting life, thank you to all of those 8 extras being opened at once. And I went, wow, this is fantastic. And then 7 days later, I woke up and I felt like the bed had sucked me in about this far, and I'm like trying to crawl back out of the mattress. I was shattered, absolutely shattered. And so I got my needles out and I'm like, oh, this is just too much effort. Put some needles in, and there was that rebound effect, I guess, which took a few days to really come back from. And so that was the negative, but I had this really big positive with it. And I decided it was worth it. So the next year I did it again. And the next year I did it again. And that's why the T-shirt, you're probably going, that's a horrible idea. And I'm like, what time? So it's something that if you want to know a little bit more about, then we'll email each other and I'll set out sort of processes and safety nets, because it's pretty full on. But it was something then that students started saying, could you do that for chronic fatigue patients? And I went, oh, gee. So I don't, but, and I don't know if any of my students when they graduated ever did, but I haven't seen anything written. It does sound like, wow, I don't know, but we'll be curious to see if someone actually does do that and clinically lets us know how that all went. So yeah. This is probably my favourite quote about our medicine. have a certain medicine I keep with me at all times. I call it the wish-fulfilling jewel. And that was from Richard's translation. I noticed he was here yesterday, bopping around to the music. I love his books. All right, let's start. So, Renmai. So, again, as it sort of shows you, it starts down there, comes out at Ren 1, and then goes up the body. As, again, you probably are aware of where the pathway goes. What I might do also in the lunch break is I might see if this can be shuffled a little bit this way as well. So, opening point lung 7 coupled with kidney 6. It's also called conception, central or directing. It's the C of all of the yin channels, and it binds up all the front of the body. Out of all the channels, out of all the 8 extras, my favourite channel to treat is the Ren. I feel like I can get to all the organs with that channel. And so even though I don't use Ren 1, all the other ones are available to me. And if I desperately need to use Ren 1, then what I've found is I'll do Ren 2 or 3 and angle the needle sort of oblique down and sort of send the energy counterflow. And that seems to work quite well as well. Its opening point, a little bit more about it, it's called lung 7, and the pinyin translates as broken sequence. Now again, Hamid mentioned this point yesterday, and I love the way he said it, where he said the law connecting pathway from it actually goes down into the hand, and he sort of said it's about sort of letting go. And this is another way of looking at it. It's broken sequence, but what does that mean? It's used to break the cycle of something that's no longer self-serving. In other words, letting go of it. And that's basically what this is saying. And I use anger as an example. And I know you don't always get patients that come in as the primary complaint being anger, but if you did, and it was something they really wanted to treat, then you could do your lung 7 and you pair it with my favourite anti-anger point, which is liver 2. It's the yin spring point, the fire clearer, and most anger is an excess. Not always, but... So you might not always use liver 2, but whatever you chose, lung 7's breaking the cycle of what? Of the anger. So whatever you want to break the cycle of, that's the design of it. So you might not ever think to use lung 7 for anger, but it's basically saying, what do you want me to do? And so you give it that guidance or direction by giving it the other point. What else does the Renmai do? Regulates the reproductive system of men and women, regulates qi in the lower jiao, aids in the lung-kidney respiration dynamic, also aids the spleen and kidneys in transforming and transporting body fluids, and is also part of that first ancestry, which is the bonding between the newborn child and the parent. And I quite like this from Deborah, actually. So it said at conception, the spirit of man, and it's sexist, but just replace man with woman if you need to. So it said at conception, the spirit of man has the purpose of his life whispered into his ear as he passes through the heavenly gateway into life. As our life unfolds, it is this secret that gives life its purpose. The Renmai governs this inner resource. So when you read that, if you've got a patient that maybe is feeling like they don't have a sense of purpose or they don't know why they're here, then potentially you treat the Renmai to bring out what their purpose is, why are they here. And I guess that's on the assumption that you believe in destiny, that we're here to fulfill a particular duty or a particular job in life. And so the bonding for Renmai is basically, again, all on the front. And again, Hamid mentioned this yesterday, where the baby is born and gets put onto the mother's chest, and the two Ren channels of the baby and the mother merge and combine. And so what happens, of course, with that is maybe that didn't happen. So for me, I didn't have a particularly good birth, poor mum as well. But basically, I came out with my arm first. Hey, world. That's right. And so they dislocated my arm, they yanked me out and shuffled me straight off because I almost died. So there was no hug, and I was put into, I don't know what they call those, humidity cribs or whatever for a while. And then in their wisdom they decided, even though I'd almost died, that I needed my measles vaccine. So I had that, and then I got measles and then nearly died again. And yeah. And so I didn't get that embrace. But what's cool is that it's almost like Mum is making up for it, because she's loves the cuddles and loves the affection and so we've made up for it. But that is something interesting. And I guess the opposite can apply, as you can be smothered or you can be rejected, and that impacts on this vessel as well. And I've already talked about that. And again, if you came in after this started, if you want the slides, I can email them to you. All right, so let's look at a couple of treatments. So this one is multiple organ imbalance that's causing multiple emotion problems. I love this particular sequence of points on the REN. So they can change, but I do like REN 4 and 6, 12 and 14, and then 17 and 21. And then again, you've got the opening point and the couple point, and then possibly points that aren't on the REN. So I've chosen spleen 6, but again, you could choose others. But it's a good one because it does treat multiple organs, doesn't it? Because it's the connector of the liver, spleen and kidney channels. But you might choose stomach 36 instead, or any range of other points. And so what I like about 4 and 6 is they're both below the belly button, and they both treat all the lower jowl organs. And then REN 6 is either right over the top of the dantian or slightly below it. And it's also theoretically either just below or right on the line where lower jowl and middle jowl connect. So what's happening with 6 is that 4 and 6 are working on lower jowl, but then 6 is kind of helping to merge with the middle. And then 12 and 14 are really good again for middle jowl, but then because 14 is the front middle of your heart, it will also connect to the upper. And then 17 and 21 are treating the upper. And then 21 also is what I call crowns the whole treatment. So it sits on top and kind of helps the other REN points work better. And it's probably an unusual one, but it's the jade pearl. So it's not the one in your suprasternal fossa, but it's the one just down from that. And yeah, that's what I do. I think my explanation is pretty much what's on the next lot of slides. So it's just explaining what I said, and then a bit more explanation on the next page. So it's an excellent treatment for chronic patient emotional complaints that are across multiple organs and jowls. And that's because it can target every single organ. So you had 6 needles only there, and they actually can treat every single organ that we have. And you don't have to do all the other ones if you don't want to, but I feel like you're trying to activate the REN, so you still need the keys for it, the opening and the couple points. And again, if I just had 6 points in the trunk, my treatment designs I'd be struggling with that because it's all a bit trunk heavy. There's nothing else on the arms, there's nothing on the legs, there's nothing on the head. I'd prefer there to be something that moves the energy around the body a bit more effectively. And if you did them all, that would be 11 needles. Now, I don't know how many needles you use, and for me, I'm usually around 8 to 16 needles. And because I mostly do bilateral needling, that would mean if I did 8 needles, it would be 4 points that I would do. Does that make sense? Yeah. I don't always do bilateral, but I do typically. I kind of go, well, if there's two spleen 6s, I should do them both. And had this wonderful semester at college a few years ago, and the student clinic had so many students, there actually had to be myself and another supervisor. And that supervisor was all unilateral. Don't do bilateral. And I'm like, I do bilateral, I don't do unilateral. And we had a wonderful semester, and the students, if they went to him, he would go, oh no, not bilateral, no, just unilateral. And you can do more needles that way, you can do more points that way. It was his argument, and he wasn't interested in the fact if there were 2 spleen 6s, you should do them both. He went, one's enough. And then you can do stomach 36 with it, and you get all these other funky combinations, was his justification. And that's okay. And then, the students would come to me and I'd be like, bilateral needling, let's get a really good combination working here. So it was a fun semester, actually. All right, the next one is fear and anxiety. So fear and anxiety that are due to heart and kidney. Now, fear and anxiety are not always heart and kidney, but more often than not, they are. And anxiety also is one of those emotions now that seems to be the flavour of the month. I don't know if you found that in clinic. Patients come in and you go, hey, how's it going? What can I help you with today? And they'll mention a few things and they'll go, I have anxiety. Oh, okay. And it's like Dr. Google or something has given this new word for people. And so for me, I don't want them just to say anxiety. I want them to tell me what that word means for them. What does that mean to you? Why have you come to the conclusion that you have anxiety? Can you explain what it is? Because some anxiety is definitely heart-based, but some of it's almost more like the person has a phobia or a fear or some sort of constantly looking around for perceived threats. What's that? Hypervigilant. And so in that instance, the anxiety might be more kidney than heart. So in this instance, though, what I've basically defined here is that the patient has fear and anxiety, and it was diagnosed as a heart and kidney imbalance. And so again, we've got our opening a couple of points, and now we've changed a few RAND points around, and instead of spleen 6, even though that would still be good, I've gone more with Shen Men, Spirit Gate. I just find that one is, and I don't know if you agree, but it's probably my favourite point for Shen, certainly distally. And then when I say distally, what's local Shen points? Because the argument is that the Shen is housed in the heart, so that would make it there. But then some authors historically have said that the Shen's actually up here. I think Sun Si Miao and Li Shi Zhen have said that it's there, and possibly there, but certainly both. And I think that makes sense because our brain, it makes sense for patients because they think all emotions are probably coming from here. They probably don't understand that it could come from here. And so I like that link. So when I say local Shen points, I actually mean here and here. And when I say here, I mean also on the back. So what I've done is 4 and 6 again to help with the kidneys. And then we've got 14, 15 and 17. So they're 3 of my favourite points in and around the heart to treat the heart Shen. So 14 would make sense, it's the front mu of the heart. 17 would make sense because it's the front mu of the heart's bodyguard. So Shin Bao, heart's embrace. So I almost like that better than calling it the pericardium. I prefer to call the pericardium the heart's embrace. And so they will both be very good for emotions. And then 15, I really like, I call it like my unofficial front mu point for the heart Shen. So the 3 of them together, I quite like. But we've still got a balance. We've got something on the arms, something on the legs, and then something on the trunk. And when you look at them, again, it's explaining why the points are there. And again, I've really kind of probably touched on this already. So fear is typically kidneys and anxiety is typically heart. And heart 7 is not part of the REN-MI, but it's one that I, in this instance, have used. Okay, so I had a patient, now I can move a little bit. I had a patient a number of years ago that was, as you can see, a lawyer. And she was only a lawyer because her dad wanted her to be a lawyer. But what was interesting in this instance is that the dad had actually skipped out. And so she was still wanting to please him by doing everything for him, even though he wasn't part of her life. And so she became a lawyer. And at 26, she'd had her gallbladder removed because they decided it needed to come out. And her mum had already had her gallbladder removed as well, but I thought that was quite young for someone to have their gallbladder removed. And she had severe anxiety and fear-based stuff. She lived on an outer suburb of Brisbane and had to get the train into the city every day for work. And what was happening is that she'd get on the train and people would start to get on the train, and then there'd be too many people on the train, and then she'd start to have like a panic attack and want to escape the train while it was still moving. And so what she started to do was go to work earlier to avoid the peak hour rush on the train and leave from work later. So again, now she's working longer hours as well to avoid situations where she'd become more anxious and fearful. So this was a big thing for her, and so she started having acupuncture, but she didn't just have acupuncture. What also I decided to do with her was I looked at her archetype system as well. I looked at her numerology as well, so another archetype system. And what was interesting is with numerology, she had everything she needed in her body to help get better. I don't know if you know much about numerology, but basically one of the principles, apart from ruling numbers and year numbers, etc., is that you put your numbers into a noughts and crosses chart, so your date of birth into a noughts and crosses chart, and where your numbers come up, you look for arrows. So you look for where there's absolutely no arrows, or you look for where there are full arrows. So say they're born on the 31st of the 12th, then they would have a 1, 2 and a 3, so it would make one arrow. So she had 4 arrows, which basically said that she was an absolute superpower. So everything she needed was inside her, and she didn't think that she had the ability to do anything. And she was coming to me in desperation. But once she understood that she was a superhero, she was able to take control of her life, and the acupuncture got her so far, and then she took over. And we also did drawings with her. So there's a few different drawings you can do to analyse the mind. One of them is to get them to draw them picking an apple from an apple tree. And then they go, oh, what do you mean? Can it be colour? It doesn't matter. Have I got to touch the apple? Doesn't matter. Am I allowed to put other things in the picture? Yes, you can if you want to. But you don't try to get them to overthink it. Just draw them picking an apple from an apple tree. And then it actually shows all these things within the picture, what's going on inside them. You know, did they reach the apple or not? Did one arm be excessively long trying to reach the apple and the rest of the body's out of proportion? And the tree is their age. So where the tree starts is the start of their life, and the top of the tree is their current age. And so are there other apples on the tree? And wherever the apple is, you divide up the height of the tree with their ages, and that's usually something really significant in their life. I had one lady that wasn't this person. She drew a big hole in the middle of the tree trunk, big black hole, and it was from when she was 12 to 16 years old. When she was 12, her sister died, and it took her 4 years to get over it. So this big black hole was this severe sadness and grief that she'd had for her sister. So this is what we did with her, and it turned out that she was in the wrong career, in case she hadn't worked that out already. And so now she does yoga, and now she does numerology, and she does all of these other things. She's still a lawyer, but she just does that part-time, and she's phasing out of it. And it was just beautiful to see how she changed, because it wasn't just acupuncture, and it wasn't just me, it was actually her that ended up helping herself ultimately. I quite like this quote, the physician is only nature's assistant. I think that worked out quite well as the perfect quote to come after my fearful lawyer. All right, the do mine. So opening point, small intestine 3, coupled with bladder 62. It's also typically called the governing vessel, and it's the sea of your yang channels, and it binds up the back of your body. And probably out of all of the 8 extras, the one that gets the most coverage for emotions is this one. Giovanni loves the Dumai for emotion-based conditions, as do a lot of other authors. Now its opening point is small intestine 3, which is translated as back ravine. It doesn't mean your back, it means that you are getting pushed from behind. And then the shi is the ravine or mountain stream. And so what is it doing for us from an emotion-based perspective? It's the wood point of the small intestine channel, and the wood points help us to connect to our hun. How are you all with your 5 spirits? Are you fairly good with all that? So I guess then very quickly, the hun is basically your heavenly soul. It's what I like calling your dream your grandest dream soul. Because there's unlimited chi up there in the universe. So dream your grandest dreams because that's what your hun's good at. That's what it likes. And so it gives you new ideas, inspiration, insight. And since the small intestine's in charge of breaking down pure and impure into impure solids and impure liquids. But that also, they talk about this idea that it also comes down to things like clear judgment and decision making. So if you are breaking down pure into impure, you're doing it properly. So you're getting good pure thoughts and you're getting rid of the impure thinking, which will give you better judgment and decision making as a result. So it gives you a surge of energy for new ideas and growth to help us change and mature. What else does the do? Sorry, this happens every time. Regulates the heart shen via the heart organ and the brain, which is probably why it's so popular, because it's doing both parts of our shen, both our heart home and our brain home. Regulates the reproductive systems of men and women, particularly in patients that are qi or yang deficient, which I guess probably makes sense because the do is one that governs yang. Strengthens the back and the spine, obviously nourishes marrow, and that helps to strengthen the spine and the brain. It can clear external, internal wind, and it's another one of the first ancestry as well. So the Dumai is like the emperor's governor watching over the kingdom, directed from the wisdom and love of the emperor's heart. The Dumai directs the activities of the mind, body and spirit with pure, forceful, dynamic, vital yang qi. And that's really, that first one is further emphasising that. Now with regards to the Dumai, you can find that if there are issues with development early in life via lack of or excessive stimulation, it can lead to problems later in life. And so that can be an excess thing where the person can't slow down, can't stop and rest, can't just be in the moment. I remember reading once, I think it was in a book called Conversations with God from Neil Donald Walsh, and God told Neil that he was a human being, not a human doing. And I've always loved that concept. And that is important for us, isn't it? Our concept of that in Chinese medicine would probably be wu wei, non-action. So we act when we need to act, and we rest when it's time to rest. And so this person is not going to be able to do that, and then this person just won't do anything. Timid, shy, held in, withdrawn. Yeah. I'll give you a lot of slides. I don't have time to read every single one of them, but just so we know what's going on. So what are we going to do? So this one is regulating all of your 5 spirits, but in particular your Hartmann, but it will also help with your hun, your po, etc. So it's doing our opening and couple points again. So for me, that would be my small intestine 3, both sides, then my bladder 62, both sides, and then stick in some dew points. Now, I don't use dew 1 very often, but that one is more approachable than Ren 1 is. And basically what I do is they get up on the table in their underwear, and then the underwear just goes down to, just below the coccyx, and then you feel for the end of the coccyx, and then with your finger on the end of the coccyx you put the needle in. And if you put it in, it's perpendicular, what happens is that it will slide in, and then you can put their underwear back over, or you can just put a towel over the top, because the needle's not going to be sticking up this way, it's going to be flat. You don't have to use dew 1, and I don't use it very often, as I said, and if you don't use it, you don't really have to replace it with anything else. You could just leave it out and continue with those other points. So the same principle really as we did with the Ren, in that each of those will work on, different levels of your Sanjiao, so different organs as we work our way up. And if you have other points that you prefer, again, if you're working on the principle that you're going to do all the organs, which will therefore also do all of the emotions and all of the spirits, then that's the principle, is do a couple down low in the lower jiao, a couple in the middle jiao, and a couple in the upper jiao. And then I'm a big fan of dew 20, and dew 24 in this instance would be another good one, because we're targeting the heart shen. And as you can see with the name, it's shen ting. You might do 23 instead. That one's also a very, very good point. It's also a ghost point, so that might be a preference. So the next slide sort of runs through what's happening there. So with your dew 4 and your dew 6, you're targeting your kidney G and your spleen Yi. And then with your dew 8, you're doing the hun. Dew 11 is shen and po. And then dew 20, I believe it does all of the 5 spirits. And then heart 7 again. Another brilliant one to help with all of the 5 spirits, not just heart shen. And because the dew is one channel, you might look at that and go, wow, that's a heck of a lot of needles. But in reality, it actually isn't, because it's not bilateral, is it? So we've got 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13. And if you left out dew 1, that would be 12. Yep, said all that already. Okay. Absolutely love this quote. I must admit my quotes do appear to be quite Western philosopher quotes, not so much Chinese philosopher quotes, but I love philosophy, Eastern and Western. And this is a ripper, because it's Hippocrates that wrote it, but gee, that sounds very Chinese, doesn't it? It is more important to know what sort of person has a disease than to know what sort of disease a person has. And he's considered to be the father of Western medicine. And that's very not Western medicine thinking. So that's absolutely beautiful. Absolutely perfect. All right, the Chong. So the opening is spleen 4. It's coupled with pericardium 6. Now, if you don't know it as Chong Mai, then you might know it as thoroughfare, penetrating, thrusting vessel. And it's the sea of all of the channels. I think I was right in saying that Hamid started with this one yesterday. And I don't know why I do them in any particular order, but yeah, I don't have them ranked from 1 through to 8. Although I did just say the Ren was my favourite vessel, didn't I? And it started the whole thing. But no, it's not done in any particular order. I guess I'm doing them from the most deepest layer to the most superficial. So the Ren, the dew, and the Chong are the deepest, and then the Dai, I guess theoretically, can be considered that because it cuts straight through your dantian as well. And then you step out, and then you link out after that. So, yeah, so the sea of 12 main channels, it binds up the centre of the body, ensuring that all of the 12 main channels are flowing smoothly in and out of the trunk into the 5 extremities, and that they are in harmony with all the other channels. And as this is probably the one vessel that we can't all agree on where it goes. I think we're pretty happy that it starts there in that dantian and it comes out at Ren 1, and then it becomes its own channel as it travels up through stomach and kidney points. But then we can't seem to decide what happens when it hits the ribs. Does it just stop there? Or does it become the kidney spirit gate points? And then does it keep going? Because I've seen some books that say that it continues up the body. And so there's that. And then there's also, does it do something on the back? And then what it does when it goes on the legs. And so you get this idea that it's coming down more the inside of the legs, yet stomach 37 and stomach 39 are considered to be important for Chong Mai. So does that mean that it's got another channel that goes that way too? So we can't seem to decide, and as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't matter. That's classic Chinese medicine for you. We've got different theories about things, and that's okay. All right, its opening point is called spleen 4, which is grandfather's grandson. Which, yes, that is sexist, but that's its translation. So you might want to call it grandparent's grandchild or whatever, but essentially, what does that mean? And so when you think about it, does your brain, like mine, when I read that translation, I start thinking, wow, is this like a hereditary thing happening here? And that is a lot of what's going on with it. Oh, another big wordy slide. Hope Kevin's not in the room. So before we get there, basically what I also loved was that the original Yellow Emperor, not the Yellow Emperor that ruled briefly after the Warring States period, who renamed himself the Yellow Emperor, but the original Yellow Emperor that supposedly ruled for 100 years, quite a long time ago. So he must have been pretty old if he ruled for 100 years. But basically, that era in Chinese history is considered to be the perfect time with perfect people with perfect rulers. And the only equivalent that I could see in my historical research anywhere else is that Athens had a period briefly where it was called Periclean Athens after Pericles, where the people that lived at that time were ruled by the perfect people, and therefore, by default, a perfect ruler makes perfect hosts or perfect subjects. And so the Yellow Emperor was part of, was it 4 or 5 emperors in that time? We had Shen, the Red Emperor as well, and they ruled in this perfect period where perfect people lived. And so the idea there is that if there was a perfect time, we want to go back to that era. We want to go back to be those types of people. We don't want to live back then. Does that make sense? We just want to be prompted to be the best we can. And so we use them as a guiding light to say, well, they were good back then. Let's aim to try and be like them. And that's what Confucius said. You know, Confucius was consistently asked or told that he was the perfect person. And he said, well, no, I'm not the perfect person. If you want the perfect people, you go back to that era. And his perfect person was the Junzi, which again is gentleman or perfect person. And all Chinese were descendants of this perfect race. Therefore, by needling spleen 4, we can tweak that perfect part inside ourselves. I love that. It's the other thing that Confucius and Mencius in particular said, that we're born good. So if we become bad, the world made us bad. Whereas other philosophies and even other Confucian scholars actually said, no, hang on, whoops, that's the wrong way. You're born bad, and Confucianism will make you good. So there's like a great religious sell, isn't it? You're bad, but if you come to me, I'll make you good. Sounds good in theory, but my brain says I have to believe that we're born good. There has to be a good bit in all of us, and that spleen 4 can target that part of us to prompt us to be better than we are. It's also good for what they call intergenerational imprinting. So that could be a hereditary disease such as cancer, for example. Or could it be an emotion? So, when's lunch? 1? Yep. Okay, so I'm curious if you are happy to put your hand up or leave it down, whatever you believe. You don't have to play this game if you don't want to. I'm curious to know whether you believe that emotions can be passed down from generation to generation. Hands up if you believe that. Yeah. And for those that didn't put their hand up, that's okay. We all have a different theory or different idea about things, and that's what's good again about our medicine, is that we can get wonderful results even if we treat someone very different to the way someone else would. I believe that emotions are passed down from generation to generation. I believe that if the emotion is particularly bad and the person has it and then they conceive you, they pass a bit of that on to you, and then you're lumped with this and you don't even know you had it. And that sooner or later, someone's got to acknowledge it. Someone in the family tree line has to deal with this emotion. I believe the emotion could be bad enough that it could create a disease, or if not a disease, a physical manifestation. When I was talking about how I did all those 8 extraordinary vessels on myself earlier, what I didn't tell you is that I think it was the second year I did it again, and everything was going great, and I play touch football, so it's like touch rugby, I guess is what you'd probably call it. So I'm chasing this bloke down the field, and I dived to touch him, and when I dived, one of my teammates came over and hit me as well, and I landed awkward on my shoulder. This was the shoulder that I came out waving, and landed funny. And I jumped up, and I'm ready to defend again, but they're that way, so then I've gone, right? And then they scored, because I wasn't defending well, and then I fell over. I just collapsed. And then I started crying, and all my teammates came running up to me and checking if I was okay, and I said, oh, my shoulder's pretty sore, and they're saying, well, we better call an ambulance. And then I started laughing. And my teammates are going, he's delirious, call the ambulance. And I just said, I'm laughing because my shoulder doesn't hurt anymore, and it's kind of funny. I don't know what's going on. But what happened is it released an emotion, and then what happened is for a large portion of the next week, I was the foulest person on the planet. I was rude, I was disrespectful, and then that stopped. And my impression of that is that when I was born and created this problem that I never dealt with, it got stored in that shoulder. And what was happening is I was always getting problems with this shoulder. And I'd get like an acute frozen shoulder where I couldn't get my arm up much higher than this or out this way. And that was a good excuse for me not having to do the clothes on the line. I can't do it, sorry Amanda, I can't get my arm up like this. See, it's not working. Yeah, whatever. So that's never come back either. So I had the emotion stored there, I landed on it funny, I'd had the 8 extras to release a deep emotion hurt. It came out, I was angry for a week, then I was over it, never had a problem with the shoulder, ever again. And so I know that's not a hereditary based thing, but that's a personal experience of what happened to me with my shoulder. But I also do believe that emotions can get passed on from generation to generation. What does the Chong do? So it regulates the uterus, prostate and kidneys. And this makes it effective in gynae, in particular fertility and menstruation. For a lot of you that do fertility or IVF or whatever, you probably have Chong Mai as one of your favourite vessels. It links the pre-heaven chi and the post-heaven chi, as it's the centre of the energetic vortex. It also improves circulation to the legs and the feet for problems like coldness, numbness or tingling. Now that's worth quickly exploring, because I'm not sure what your experience is again, but the Dai Mai is very good for that. And it makes sense because it's cutting through you. It's the only vessel that goes across you. Every other vessel goes up or down. It's the only one that cuts straight through you. And so it makes sense that it's regulating energy above and below itself. What you might not know is the Chong can do something similar. It can regulate energy up and down the body as well, in and out of the legs. And so what happens is, if I have a patient where that's the situation, where maybe they're hot above, cold below, or hot above, damp below, then the Dai Mai or the Chong Mai is one that I consider to help to regulate that energy flow. And it's often called the Sea of Blood, which again is another reason why it's often quite popular for menstrual disorders, amongst other things. And it's, again, a part of the first ancestry. So with this particular quote from Deborah, the Chong Mai is an intercommunication with all that is important so we can move forward along a straight pathway, by joining all routes along the way and by gathering together the experiences that come. It is responsible for the pattern of the development of life. Again, a bit like Ren, Du and Chong, they all start in the same place. And that was, again, your Dantian, or where your bit at conception that made you. Let's see what we got there. Yeah, I'll need to keep going through so I can get everything done before lunch. What I want to talk about is the spirit gate points before we go to lunch. And these are debatable because, for a few reasons. One is they're debatable because they might not even be on the Chong Mai. They're also debatable because they might not do what I'm about to say they do. And it's quite a polarising topic. So the kidney spirit gate points, as you may be aware, are kidney 22 to kidney 27. Occasionally kidney 21 jumps on board. Some authors have that one in as well. The other thing worth pointing out is with them, they're in two locations depending on the book you read. They're either the straight up Tu Sun lateral, in between each of the ribs, or they're actually not that far out. I don't want to touch, but some authors will say slide off the sternum. So if you just slide off the sternum, maybe you'll be about 1 sun out, and that's where you go. I go to the 2 sun out, traditional sort of kidney point location, but again, we still can't seem to all agree. And what we can't agree on, certainly in Australia, is whether these points even do what they say they do. And so we probably have about 20 lecturers at the college I work at, and I'd say probably 10 of them think this is poo-poo, it's rubbish, it doesn't work, it doesn't do that. And then the other 10 go, oh yeah, I really like these. So it makes for interesting conversations when you get together. And you go, oh, hey, you really like the spirit gate points, don't you? And the person goes, oh no, that's rubbish. So all I can really say, I guess, with this is you have to make up your own mind. Try them out and see if you believe that they helped the treatment, or only do them and see what happens. Now, so we're just going to, again, we've got like 10 minutes before lunch, so this is what we're going to finish off with. But I am curious, are you taught the kidney spirit gate points in your studies in UK and Europe? And yeah, so some are nodding, some are, yeah. They're kind of like, another really good example is the outer bladder points treating the 5 spirits? Do they do that? Or do they just happen to have the name that says that they do it? You know, Hun Men, bladder 47, gate of your ethereal soul. Does it actually treat the ethereal soul, or was it just a kind of cool name to call it? So Chinese pinyin for points, they don't do it because it sounds cool. They do it because it's telling you where it is, how it works, what it does, etc., etc. So I believe those outer bladder points do treat the spirits, but same thing. In Australia, it's very much no, it doesn't, or yes, it does. No, maybe. It always seems to be one or the other, yes or no. Now, for each of the spirit gate points, we have an element that they treat. Now, this is not what everyone writes. And I was reading Yvonne Farrell's book last year, and she says with kidney 27, she believes it's all of the elements. These ones are often debatable because they're often classed as being metal or wood on their own. So sometimes you'll see kidney 24 as being metal only or wood only. But when you think about metal and wood and their spirits, they're Hun and Po. And Hun and Po are like yin and yang. You can't have one without the other. So you dream your grandest dream and then you action it through your Po. So it becomes the walk your talk. And so you dream it, then you do it. And then you be it. And the other 3 spirits get involved too, but the Hun and Po are very, very important. Because if all you ever do is dream, then you never get anything done. Or if all you ever do is do, then you lose the ability to dream. And so, and this is what you see at people's, you might visit someone's house and for the first time and you go up and you go, oh gee, your garden looks really good. You know, obviously you're working through something there. And they went, oh yeah, that was a project I gave up on about a year ago. And then you walk into their house and the kitchen's partly done. And you go, oh okay, it's a good project. Oh, I gave up on that as well. And so this person always comes up with wonderful ideas, but then when it becomes time to do it, they start and then they go, oh, it's too hard. Oh, I've got a good idea. And so that's what happens. They keep coming up with great ideas, but they never do it. And so what's going to happen? Opposites attract. That person finds a Po partner. And so then, say the Hun person is a female, she comes up with the great ideas, and then the male goes and does it. And it's a great team. She thinks it, he does it, they both feel important because they're both doing something that the other one doesn't do. But in reality, for us, we'd be much better off actually just getting that right in our own bodies. So think the thought, then do the thought. And then obviously the opposite can apply. If you're too much in your Po, you're in what I call, you've got concrete boots. So you just do the same things that you've always done because you no longer have the ability to dream up new ideas. And so they both have to be together. And that's why I put them both together in these 2 points, 24 and 26. Now, very quickly, because we can't do practical demonstrations here, how do I do these points? So there's 2 options. One is your patient sits down, you go through the case history, and then you diagnose them with an element, or you diagnose that this particular element needs to be treated today, and so you choose the point based on your diagnosis. The other option with the kidney spirit gates is you get out of the way, they get out of the way. And what I mean by that is they lay up on the table on their back and you stand up at the head, so they're head up here, feet down here, and you stand up and you work your way down, pressing the points. Some people do a point locator. They set the point locator at the right intensity for them, and then they go down. Every time it makes the big squeal, then that's the point that needs to be done. Or you do 2-inar, so you push on kidney 27, 26, 25, 24, 23, 22, and you get a baseline hurts good pain. You know, it's that pain where it's almost too much, but it still kind of feels good. So that's what you want. Once you've got your baseline, you go back and you do them all again, and every single time they go, oh, geez, which one's that? Left side. Then I make a little highlighter mark on the skin. Or they'll go, oh, that made my tummy all queasy. Which one? Right side. Okay. So you work your way down all of them. And when you've pushed them all a second time, any one that they really reacted to, or one that got really, really red, or maybe one that didn't get red at all, or you leave this big giant crater on one side, but on the other side it bounces back. So it's a few different things, but once you've done that, you put the little dots down, and you should have anywhere from, say, 1 to maybe 3 or 4. And that's probably not going to be bilateral very often there. And so you might have a couple on the left side and a couple on the right, and then you needle those. And in theory, you could needle just those. Or you go, okay, go back to that previous slide. I did 22, 25, and 26. Okay, what were they? Oh, okay, so they were the different elements. So I'll add a couple of extra points in on the body or on the arms or legs to supplement the points that they had, that they needed. Now, did that make sense? Okay, so that's kind of how I would typically do it. Now, if your patient is too much in their head and they can't get out of their own way, and they're saying things like, this is silly, why are you making me do this? Then they're probably not the best patient to be doing that on, so you'd probably choose the points that they need. Or if they're going, oh, I want to do this, but I just can't, I'm overanalyzing it. Get them to focus on the music in the room. So stop thinking about this, just listen to the music. And then just as soon as you feel something, tell me. So then their rational brain's not getting in the way. Because that's what we're trying to avoid. We want to get into their subconscious. So all that is what I've talked about already. And so what is each one and why are they given the element they're given? So this one is called veranda or corridor walk. I prefer veranda because a veranda is on the edge of the house. And so it's good for water because water likes being in their cave, in their safe place at home. But they can go out to the veranda and sit on the veranda and watch the world. But they still feel safe. And if they need to, they can scurry back inside again. And with fire, because they like being out in the world, sometimes they need a rest. But they don't want to go too far. So they pull back into the veranda, sit for a bit, recharge, and then back out into the world again. So it's sitting there equally so that water feels safe and fire feels safe. '23 is spirit seal. So even though it's got Shen in the name, it's not typically considered a fire element point. More earth. Why? Because it's the more the earth stuff. It's the balancing of things. So this point's the one where you picture the 5 elements, but instead of it being wood, fire, earth, metal, water, you have earth in the middle. And you have fire and water and wood and metal, and earth sits in the middle. And it's the one that balances everything. And so that's why kidney 23, even though it's got Shen in the name, it's more for earth. It will treat fire, but it's more for earth. I love this one, Spirit Burial Ground. The name is interesting because you could look at it as being that you're trying to bury something. I don't want this anymore, so let's just bury it. But then that's not very proactive for you as a person, is it? Because you never dealt with it. So what happens is we actually make this a ceremony. So the ceremony is that we will deal with this thing, process it, and then let it go. And we let it go, but we bury it because it was an important process for us. So we bury it and maybe even put a little tombstone up to honour the whole process. So that's just very important that we're clear on that. We don't want to ever suppress anything. We want the person to deal with it, get it out, and once it's out, actually allows for room for new stuff, new growth, new ideas to come in. And so that's all that I just wanted to make sure, because you do get some patients that say, I want you to take this away, I want to forget it again. Hamid had some great examples, clinical examples yesterday, and one of those is sexual abuse. and your patient may be coming to you for something completely different, and then some event prompts them to go, wow, actually, I was abused 20 years ago, but I'd forgotten. And this happened to a patient that came into the student clinic where she'd been abused by her uncle, and then her uncle went overseas for work, and this was before she was 10, and she was 30, and he showed up at the front door, knocked on the front door, and she answered. And when she opened the door and saw him, she remembered that she'd been raped by him, but she'd forgotten. She'd forced herself, or however processes go there, to forget. The second she saw him, it all came back. So she came into the student clinic and she said, I've heard that you can help me get rid of stuff. Well, I don't want you to get rid of it, I just want you to make me forget it again. I want you to squash it back inside me, is what she said. And I said, well, that would be nice, but acupuncture doesn't really work like that. It would actually help you to process and deal with it so that it's gone, not squashed back in, potentially creating disease later on in your life because it's a trauma you never dealt with. And so that's sometimes the misconception with Kidney 24 is we think we're using it so we can help a patient to forget about it again. It's not. It's to help to come out, to process it, honour it, thank it, bury it. That's what it means. And this one also helps with, it's the last bit. So the old waste has to be buried to make way for the new seedlings or young wood. So it's metal and wood that's happening there. All right, 25, spirit storehouse. So this is a fire element ripper. But it will work on every one of the Wu Shen. And when you treat fire, you treat Shen. So Shen is all of the 5 spirits anyway. So it will still do all 5, but its priority is more the fire side of things. 26 is wood and metal again. And basically it's helping to connect our Hun and our Po. And then 27, again, Yvonne Farrell is suggesting it's all of them, and I'm not saying that it's not. From my experience, I've not seen that written in many books, and really most books will say it's water and metal that it treats. And even just looking at the point itself, it's a kidney point, so it's a water channel, and then kidney 27 is a ripper to treat your lungs, which are part of metal. And then the treatment, and then it's lunch, is the emotional intergenerational imprinting. So it's this idea that an emotion that's going through the generations can be treated, but you could also do it for genetic diseases that aren't emotion-based. And with this one, again, we've got the opening and couple points, and then we've got points like kidney 13, 16, 21, and then we've got points that aren't on the Chong, like you do 20, Yin Tang, Sanjiao 4, and kidney 3. So if we look at those points on the next page, these are on the Chong, but they're also treating the kidneys, and the kidneys are the root of our jing. And so genetic-based things, we look at kidneys as being very important. And the Chong is important because it all starts there. But then we also want to make sure that the heart Shen's constantly being used. And then Sanjiao 4 and kidney 3 treat the kidneys. And I don't really have time to explain it, but Sanjiao 4 is one of those funny ones. It's the Yuan source point of Sanjiao, but some of the classic books talk about the Sanjiao as potentially being involved with our jing. So it's like you've got a kidney point on your arm. Yeah, sort of talked about all that really. Yeah, so, yep, talked about Chong, talked about kidneys and hearts. I've done all that as well. It's a lot of needles, it is 16, so if you wanted to unilateral some of them maybe, or leave some out, choose the ones that you think are best. And we'll do that case study after lunch. So, I do want to make sure that we've got time for questions. So if you are coming back this afternoon, I'll make sure, we might even start with some questions and then finish with some. If you aren't here this afternoon but you have a question, come up and see me now. But otherwise, thank you so much and all the best and enjoy your lunch.